Sometimes the relationships we blindly trust shatter our faith in ways we never imagined. Something similar happened to me. The one who ruined me was none other than my own, who shamelessly crossed all limits with me. My name is Neelam, and I had only one elder brother, Bilal. He was about 25 years old, but he wasn't married yet. Whenever he brought up the topic of marriage, our mother would scold him harshly, telling him not to think about it, as he had many responsibilities. Hearing this, my brother would angrily lock himself in his room. This argument happened frequently in our home, and I silently observed it all. I felt my brother was right. He was of marriageable age, but hadn't experienced that happiness yet. However, my mother feared that if he got married, he would abandon us and devote himself to his wife. She always said, "Your father is no longer alive. Your brother supports this household, and I still need to get you married. If I let him marry first, you will remain here forever, serving your sister-in-law." This fear had taken deep root in my mother's heart. She believed that if my brother got married, he would no longer belong to us, and we would be left to struggle alone. I was 8 years younger than my brother, and by then I was already 22 years old. Due to our financial struggles, marriage proposals weren't coming for me, which made my mother very anxious. She was waiting for my wedding to happen first so she could think about my brother's marriage afterward. However, neither my proposals were coming nor was my brother getting married. As a girl, I could never openly express my emotions, but my brother would argue with my mother, saying, "How long will you keep me waiting for her marriage? Just get me married now. Her time will come when it's meant to." But my mother trusted neither my brother nor any potential daughter-in-law, so she kept refusing. Whenever my brother pressed too much, my mother would pick up a knife and threaten to cut her wrist, ending the argument there. My brother would storm off to his room, and my mother considered it a victory, thinking she had secured my future. My mother was innocent. She couldn't understand the difficulties she was creating for me. My brother's emotions had turned into a volcano waiting to erupt. Meanwhile, my mother continued searching for proposals for me, even paying matchmakers to find a good match from a respectable family. But perhaps it was my fate, or poverty stood as an impenetrable barrier in our small home, keeping potential suitors away. Time passed, and I turned 25 while my brother reached 33. Neither my hands were adorned with henna, nor did my brother get to wear a wedding turban. My brother eventually stopped mentioning marriage altogether, but his behavior had started to change. He would come home late at night, his eyes red in the morning, and he would avoid talking to us. When I found his behavior increasingly strange, I asked my mother what was wrong with him. She dismissed it, saying, "Don't worry too much. He's just trying to pressure me into arranging his marriage. But I'm your mother, and I won't fall for his tricks so easily. Until your wedding happens, it's not his turn." My mother was still adamant about her decision, but I felt that something else was going on with my brother. However, I didn't have the courage to question him. I was too afraid of his anger. He always spoke in a harsh tone, and sometimes he would even turn away in disgust. Every day I prayed for a change in our fate, hoping that happiness would finally enter our lives. Then one day, my prayers were answered. A good marriage proposal came for me from a well-off family. Although the groom was older, my mother had no objections and quickly agreed to the proposal. I was overjoyed that my marriage was finally arranged, and I hoped that my brother's turn would soon come as well. By delaying my brother's wedding, my mother had managed to save a significant amount of money, which she used to arrange my wedding in a grand manner. I left my home and moved to my new family. My husband, Bilal, was a wonderful man who wholeheartedly accepted me into his life, and I finally started experiencing happiness. As I moved forward in life, I became increasingly concerned about my brother's marriage. I even asked some of my in-laws to look for a suitable girl for him, and my mother also actively started searching for proposals. But fate had other plans. One day, my mother suddenly fell seriously ill. I rushed to my parental home to take care of her, but to my utter shock, she passed away right before my eyes, leaving my world shattered. I couldn't believe that she was gone so suddenly. My brother was at work when I called him, and he immediately rushed home. Arrangements for my mother's funeral began, and the house plunged into mourning. Gradually, people left, and only my brother and I remained. Throughout the entire ordeal, my brother was eerily silent. I neither saw him cry nor heard him say much. Even when I tried to talk to him after everyone left, he remained completely quiet. Bilal wanted me to return to my in-laws' house, but I couldn't leave my brother alone. I told Bilal that I wanted to stay with him for a few days, since there was no other woman in the house to take care of him. My words made Bilal think for a moment, and then he said, "I can't leave you here alone, as my elder brother and his family are visiting. However, we can bring your brother to our place for a few days until we find a suitable match for him." I was sure my brother would never agree to this, but to my surprise, he readily accepted when Bilal spoke to him. Perhaps the fact that only Bilal and I lived in the house made him comfortable with the idea. My brother packed his essentials and moved in with us. I promised him that I would soon find him a good match and he could settle back into his own home. Despite my assurances, my brother remained silent. He used to fight with my mother over getting married, but now marriage seemed to hold no importance for him. Maybe my mother's sudden passing had deeply affected him. I thought that having him stay with us for a while might help him recover emotionally. I brought him to our home and gave him the room adjacent to our bedroom. I returned home after 3 days to find everything in disarray. I immediately started cleaning, and after finishing cooking, I thought about my brother. I went to his room to call him for dinner and found him lying down. I sat beside him, and suddenly he grabbed my hand and said, "Mother was very unfair to me. She arranged your marriage but left this world without arranging mine. I spent my entire life working hard, thinking that one day happiness would come my way. But now even she is gone." His tone was strange, and his eyes were fixed on me in an unsettling way. I had never felt such a gaze from my brother before, and it made me uncomfortable. To avoid the awkwardness, I hurriedly asked him to come to the dining table. He took just a few bites and then fell silent, his eyes alternating between me and Bilal. During dinner, Bilal was busy talking about his day, unaware of my brother's demeanor, but I kept noticing his discomfort. I felt that he wasn't comfortable living in our home, which reaffirmed my earlier desire to stay at my mother's house after she passed away. But I had to return for Bilal's sake. I realized I needed to do something about my brother's marriage as soon as possible. That night, my brother went to his room, while Bilal and I went to bed. Seeing me lost in thought, Bilal asked, "Are you thinking about your mother?" I replied, "Mother had to leave eventually, but now I am worried about my brother. He is getting older, and he needs to get married soon." Bilal reassured me, saying, "There are a couple of girls at my office who have postponed their marriages due to family responsibilities. If you want, I can ask around." I was relieved to hear this and told him to go ahead. I would personally meet the girl later. Talking to Bilal eased my worries, and a couple of days passed peacefully. Then Bilal shared some news that left me anxious. He said his mother would be staying with us for a few days as she was returning from his elder brother's house. This worried me because my brother was also living with us, and I hadn't informed my mother-in-law about it. As I feared, things took an unexpected turn. A couple of days after my mother-in-law arrived, she brought up something that shook me to my core. During breakfast, she suddenly said, "Why does your brother come to your room in the middle of the night?" I was taken aback and looked at her in shock. "You must be mistaken," I replied. "Why would my brother come to my and Bilal's room at midnight?" Bilal, sitting beside me, was equally surprised and stared at his mother in disbelief. She looked at me intently and said, "Daughter-in-law, I have seen it with my own eyes. Your brother enters your room late at night, and I am asking you why." Before I could respond, my brother walked in for breakfast. He overheard the conversation and immediately grew defensive. "Auntie, why are you saying such things? Why would I go to their room? I work all day and come home exhausted in the evening, but if my presence is causing any trouble, I will leave." My brother was about to leave without having breakfast, but I quickly stopped him and apologized, saying, "Mother must have misunderstood. Please sit and eat. There's nothing like that." Bilal also urged him to stay, so he reluctantly sat down for breakfast. However, my mother-in-law's expression had changed noticeably. A little while later, my brother left for work, and Bilal also went out. My mother-in-law approached me and said, "Daughter-in-law, I am not mistaken. Your brother's behavior is truly suspicious." I was angry and firmly responded, "You are only a guest here for a week or two. It would be better if you don't interfere in our household matters, especially when it comes to my brother. Hearing this, my mother-in-law became upset and warned, "One day you will regret this attitude." She went back to her room, leaving me stunned. I didn't understand what she was implying, but at that moment, it felt like a threat. In the evening, when I told Bilal about it, he tried to calm me down, saying, "Don't worry, I often leave the door open because of the heat. From now on, we will lock the door before sleeping." His words hurt me deeply, and I asked, "Do you also doubt my brother? Is that why you want to lock the door?" Bilal reassured me, "It's not that. I just want to be careful while my mother is here. I don't want her to leave with a bad impression." From that night on, Bilal started locking the bedroom door. A couple of days passed peacefully, but then my mother-in-law created another issue. She said, "Your brother is drugging you both. I don't know what grudge he holds against you or what he wants." Bilal and I were both sitting in her room when she said this. Her words made my blood boil with anger. She was stirring up yet another problem. I looked at Bilal and he turned to his mother saying, "Why are you saying such things? Aslam is a good guy and he is still grieving our mother's death. We are already looking for a bride for him and will arrange his marriage soon." My mother-in-law replied, "I don't doubt your intentions, but there's something off about Aslam's behavior. First, he used to sneak into your room at midnight, and now I've seen him mixing something into your milk. It was a white powder, and I am sure he's trying to drug you both." Bilal looked at me with a strange expression and asked, "What is your brother doing?" My mother wouldn't lie. Something must be going on. Bilal suddenly started believing her, which upset me. I tried to reason with him, saying, "Think logically. If he had drugged us, how would we still be sitting here talking? Surely it's just a misunderstanding." My mother-in-law insisted, "I may be old, but I'm not blind. I know what I saw. You both need to be cautious. Something is wrong with Aslam." Hearing this, Bilal got up angrily and stormed toward my brother's room. I hurried after him. Bilal confronted my brother and demanded, "What did you mix into our milk last night?" My brother looked at him, confused and anxious. "Why would I put anything in your milk?" "What are you talking about?" he asked. Bilal, still furious, said, "My mother saw you with her own eyes. First, you were sneaking into our room at night, and now you're mixing something into our drinks. We brought you here with good intentions, but you have turned against us." Bilal looked at my brother angrily and said, "I'm leaving this house right now. From now on, don't call me your brother. I sacrificed my happiness for you my whole life, and now look how your husband is treating me. He never wanted me in this house, and that's why he and his mother are making up these accusations to kick me out." My brother started packing his belongings in anger, and I tried to stop him, but Bilal insisted, "Let him go. It's no longer appropriate for him to stay here." I never expected such behavior from Bilal. Frustrated, I said, "If my brother cannot stay here, then I won't stay here either. If you can't trust my brother, how can I trust you?" Bilal, equally upset, replied, "Fine, then leave with your brother. You can't see what he's doing to you, but the day you realize the truth, it will be too late." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I turned to my brother, saying, "I'm coming with you." Gathering my essentials, I left with my brother and returned to my parents' house. I loved Bilal deeply, but I never expected him to take such an extreme stance, blindly believing his mother's words and not only accusing my brother, but also humiliating us like this. I told my brother, "I will personally ensure your marriage and that you have a good life because you truly deserve it." Setting aside my own sorrow, I began searching for a suitable match for my brother. I would spend the whole day doing household chores and go out in the evening to meet potential brides. After a long search, I finally found a wonderful girl. She was a little younger, but very beautiful. When I told my brother about her, he immediately refused and said something that left me stunned. He said, "I don't want to get married anymore." Frustrated, I asked, "Why are you saying this? I put in so much effort to find someone for you. I even left my home for your sake. How will you spend your whole life alone?" My brother smiled and replied, "I'm not alone anymore. You're here with me now. We can spend our lives together." I couldn't understand what he meant. "You always insisted on getting married," I said. "Now that I've found a good match, what's the problem?" He sighed and confessed, "I was in love with someone, but she got married." I begged our mother to arrange our marriage, but she never agreed and her family got her married elsewhere. Since that day, I never mentioned marriage again. I never asked you to find a bride for me. You were the one who kept looking for one, but I don't want to get married anymore. Shocked, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me this before? I thought you just needed some time, which is why I brought you to my house." What he said next shook me to the core. "I went to your house to show you what it feels like when something you love is taken away from you. You were the reason Mother didn't let me get married, and she took my love away from me. Meanwhile, you happily started your life with Bilal, and no one cared about my feelings. Now that Mother is gone, I'm left completely alone, and you only agreed to take care of me until I got married. You couldn't sacrifice your whole life for me, but because of you, I sacrificed everything," my brother said. "That's why I decided that I would never let you and Bilal live happily together. Your mother-in-law was right. I was mixing something in your milk. But it wasn't just any medicine. It was something to make you infertile. I wanted you both to long for happiness your entire lives, just as I have. Your mother-in-law saw me, and it made my job easier. She threw you out of your house, and now you have no choice but to live a lonely life with me. Only then will you realize the pain I've been through." Hearing my brother's words, I felt like my entire world had collapsed. How could he do this to me? What had I done to deserve such cruelty? I understood that my mother had sacrificed many of his dreams for my better future, but that was her decision, not mine. My brother had been secretly giving me medicines to prevent me from having children, and the thought filled me with immense shame, especially realizing that he used to sneak into our room at night and watch us. Through tears, I asked him, "How could you do this to me? You are my brother." He coldly replied, "I am human too. If I have suffered such injustice, why should I forgive others?" I packed my belongings, said goodbye to him, and returned to my in-laws' house. Bilal was overjoyed to see me and expressed his love and happiness. I didn't have the courage to tell him the truth about my brother or what he had been doing to us. It's been almost a year since I returned, and I have cut off all contact with my brother. But what pains me the most is that I still haven't been able to conceive. My husband and I have tried all kinds of treatments, but every doctor says that I can never have children. Sometimes when I look back at the past, I am left in shock at how my own brother, crossing all limits of shame, destroyed my home with his own hands. He deprived me of motherhood just because he couldn't achieve happiness in his own life. Can a brother really do something so cruel? But deep down, I know that some of the blame lies with my mother. In trying to secure my future, she neglected my brother's happiness. If his love had not been taken away from him, perhaps today he would have been like any other protective brother to me.